Welcome, Kristin Casey. And you are an intimacy coach at Casey Consulting. I assume that's your business, and you're a surrogate partner intern. Are you an intern still?
Yes, we're just, I think, basically waiting on paperwork. It looks like I'm going to be certified any day now.
Great, great, great.
Yeah.
And you're a writer, you're an author, you're kind of doing it all. And
feels like it.
Intimacy coach, that's very interesting. So does that mean you work mostly with men?
I do. I mean, there are intimacy coaches who work with couples and women. Some exclusively work with women, or I exclusively work with men as an intimacy coach. As a surrogate partner, I do work with, I'm more open to whatever gender,
Sure.
Anyone I can help really in that area.
Great, 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 great. And in working with men, so you do some real, hands-on stuff. It sounds like you're not just doing phone calls. You're meeting them in person, and I see on your site it showed that you do a couple hour sessions and sometimes up to multiple day intensives. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, my minimum appointment right now is 3 hours. I just feel like that's the most effective.
Mm-hmm.
There are some clients who do better at a slower pace in shorter spurts,
Mm-hmm.
They're generally my surrogate partner clients. And so I'll end up working with them every week or every other week for 2 hours at a time. As an intimacy coach, it's the same type of issues that I'm dealing with, but the client is just a little bit more ready to move at a faster pace and get more at once. And so the main reason, for that reason, and also because mainly, I have found that in this work, when I really immerse myself in it, which is how I do it,
yeah,
I can't see more than one client per day. I give that session my all, and I really connect with that client. And afterwards, I won't say I'm drained. I feel very floaty afterwards, after a really good session, but I can't sort of shift gears or shift focus and then work with someone else that day. And so in order to have a schedule where I can write some days and coach some days, I have to make the most of each day. And so not only is it more effective, but it's really the only way for me to be able to work and earn a living. So
right.
Yeah.
So men come to you and they obviously have some kind of intimacy issue, and they have some kind of sexuality issue potentially, and those two kind of wrap together and all into one. So do you always start right off with men on the topic of sex and what's going on with them? Do they bring that up first? Is that always?
No, not always.
Okay.
I initially, what's that?
But often?
Yeah, I would say more often than not.
Okay.
Sometimes I initially billed myself as a dating and intimacy coach, mainly because I thought I would get more dating coach clients. I really was much more interested in doing the intimacy coaching, but I just sort of assumed I'd get more dating coach clients.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I very quickly found out that I was wrong. I was getting far more intimacy coaching clients. And since that was my interest, I sort of took that off my, most of my marketing. And what I do now is I incorporate a lot of dating coaching into my intimacy coaching for the clients who need it. So I will get some clients who need more than anything to learn, to practice, to experience some interaction with a woman in which they can feel safe, and where the interaction is sort of structured so they can overcome a lot of social anxiety, dating anxiety, build some self-confidence, learn some communication techniques and some flirting strategies. That's a big one. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that I do as a coach that fall really under dating coaching that have nothing to do with sex or sexuality per se. I mean, some of those dating coach clients need some of the like initial leading up to sex moves. I do a lot of choreography. How do you move in for that first kiss? How do you read her body language? How do you establish consent? How do you how do you let her know you're interested? How do you know, how can you touch her? That's not crossing a boundary, but that lets her, you know, so everything from flirting, establishing that connection, that romantic or flirtatious connection, going in for a kiss, that kind of stuff, all the way up to like pinning a woman against a wall in sort of a, you know, sexy kind of way that's not clumsy or brutish.
Right.
But that's, again, that's more dating coaching stuff. I would say it used to be like 80-90% of my business were men that needed help with some sort of sexual dysfunction, or perhaps a libido issue or low self-confidence. You know, there's a whole range. We'll get into that. Lately, it's been, I don't know, 70-30 maybe. 70-80% of my clients are dealing with, these are the top issues. Premature ejaculation is a big one. Inhibited ejaculation, or delayed ejaculation, inhibited orgasm. Erectile dysfunction that is not either not physical or medical issue, or at least not entirely.
What's inhibited? What's the difference between that and erectile dysfunction?
Well, the erectile dysfunction is mostly about firmness, losing firmness at inopportune moments, or having an unreliable level of firmness and or lasting. And then the inhibited, delayed ejaculation or inhibited ejaculation. I prefer the term inhibited. It just seems more accurate to me, but that's when somebody can stay erect, but just not complete, not get to,
That's pretty common, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's not as, I don't see it as much, and I don't think that the statistics are as high for that as premature ejaculation, but it's certainly, it's either rising or men are being more open about it, but it's at least, I think they say 10% of the population. It's probably a little bit more than that. But the premature
for all of them to combined, or for the
I'll have to double check the statistics. I believe that premature ejaculation is, they say that it's something that affects up to 30% of the population on a regular basis. Like I think you may have heard this, that they say 90% of the male population has it at some point, you know, sometimes here and there, but someone who's having it regularly. And there are two different kinds that I see frequently, and I've started to notice a really big difference between the two. One is the lifelong premature ejaculation, someone who's been dealing with this issue. And I've come to believe that there's a sensitivity, a heightened sensitivity, like the nerve endings are extra sensitive, and that there's probably some pelvic floor tension in there. And then the acquired, which is things were working fine, and then all of a sudden it's an issue that developed later in life.
So you kind of had me at techniques to pin a girl against a wall.
That was really, I recently, it was so funny. You know, I think I've been coaching for 2 years, because it's in just about 2.5 years, not quite. And maybe 6 months ago, I had somebody come to me. His wife actually sent him to me, and she really wanted him to be more assertive and dominant. In fact, she showed him her favorite porn star, who was, you know, he was known for being dominant, that he did dominant scenes. And I didn't know this guy's name, but she showed her husband, why can't you be like that? And he would try. And, you know, and he had that in him, but he hadn't really expressed it. He'd been a real, you know, good son, good father. And so that part of him had not really been brought out yet. And she was, he felt so, I think, afraid of disappointing her. And by the way, this scenario I'm describing to you is very common. I'm describing this one client, but I could be describing 10 clients. So he would try with her, and if he got it a little wrong or was a little timid or clumsy, she would get real frustrated real quick. And so
that kills it.
And you know, sometimes it's hard to practice with your partner, because it does take some of the spontaneity out of it. And so anyway, together they found me, and he flew in to Austin to see me. And together we figured out like 4 different ways he could come onto her in a dominant way, like approach her in the bathroom or approach her in the kitchen. And we choreographed. I watched the videos that she liked. So I saw how this guy did his moves, you know,
Okay.
did he come up from behind? How did he put his arm around her? You know, what did he say? How did he turn her around? All that stuff. And so I choreographed like 4 different scenarios, and we went through them step by step repeatedly, so that, you know, in his brain, it's just like a dance step, just like learning the waltz or some, you know, country song. If you can learn it on paper, but if you don't get out on the dance floor and do it 3 or 4 or 5 times in a row, you won't be able to do it, you know, automatically. And so that's what we went through for a whole week. Well, we went through a lot of stuff, but so yeah, pinning up against the wall, I have a whole step by step. You know, you put your hand here, you know, grab her there, do it like this. And there's a couple options, and then things to look out for, you know, balance and where her tailbone should be and all that.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of how much I enjoy doing that when I'm working with couples. I am amazed how often this comes up, where, you know, the man feels absolutely scared to be aggressive like this, and he has it in him, and he thinks he's going to push her away. And in fact, he has spent much of his life in multiple relationships and with the current relationship pushing women away. So when we're out there in the world and we're looking at women and we're gawking at women and just staring, we are in that process in public, you know, and then we get into a real relationship and we have this need to, I'm not going to call it a need. We just, you know, we want to devour a woman. And some men I know are more, maybe a little more feminine, don't have this quality, but how to do this and pull it off. It's interesting that you brought up choreographing it, because I don't actually have the couple stand up and choreograph it at that level, but I actually will talk to them and I will give them idea after idea of, okay, and then he could do this. And then I look at her, and, you know, I'm really good with the couple when they're with me in person, and I'll look at her and I'll say, how's that for you? You know, that he's that intense. And, you know, we can talk about it, but actually choreographing a scene for them to understand how to do that is amazing. I'm more about the improvisation of the man actually staying attuned with the woman, with eye contact, and knowing moment by moment, like every 5 to 8 seconds, what is happening for her.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that that's really important. And it's something that is not common enough, you know, that attunement. And, you know, we don't really raise our men to be attuned. We raise them to, you know, get the job done or whatever. And women are the ones who are supposed to sort of build and create or maintain that attunement. But I think the reason, one of the benefits of choreographing something and having him go through it is that it becomes automatic. You know, it becomes something that he's like, when you're driving to work every day, it becomes automatic. And so while you're driving to work, you don't have to think, do I turn here? Do I turn here? It's automatic. And then your mind can wander, and you can listen to the radio. You can, you know, you can outline your great American novel, whatever. So if I give this guy the moves and he gets comfortable with them, then his body does go on autopilot, and he can be more attuned. He's not focused on, you know, am I doing this right? Being self-conscious. Is she liking this? What is my next move? He's actually be able to focus on her because his body's got the routine down. You know what I mean? And I think that's, you know, what the feedback that I get has been, you know, that sense of self-consciousness that can really derail. It can bring on the premature ejaculation or the inhibited or the erectile dysfunction. And so getting them out of that self-consciousness, for men to know, you know, to know that they have the tools to do what she probably wants. And this woman was very clear. I want this. I want you to be dominant like this guy at that level, in that sexual way. And so once he learned the moves, and she wasn't there with a critical eye saying, oh, you're doing it wrong. He was with me, somebody who's very nurturing, and you know, I create a very sort of safe container for them to, you know, not quite get it right, to screw up and not feel, you know, embarrassed or like they failed because we're not actually having a, you know, a sexual interaction. You know, they once they feel like they've got that down, they can approach their partner with confidence. And it's that confidence that translates. You know, I mean, there's you can know all the moves in the world, but if you don't feel confident, she's going to sense it. You can even be a little clumsy, but if you're confident, you know, you're sort of forgiven. It, the hotness of the moment is maintained. So by giving them those moves and helping them get it down to a routine, they can go into their relationship or dating life and do it with confidence, which is what, you know, that's what most men want. They want to know they're doing it right. They want to know that they're.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. You know, I was thinking with the confidence thing, how, you know, it could be everything from, you know, paying a bill on time to pinning a woman against a wall. There's something that is completely outside of the realm of, you know, BDSM. Let's like go out. We're not talking about that. We're actually talking about this thing that's kind of built into the masculine and feminine. And there's this thing that a woman seems to want to know, that the man has made a decision and he's going to do this and he's sure about it and he's going to follow through with it and he's positive it's going to happen. And if you get real intense about it, there's nothing she can do to stop him. This is happening, and I know I'm going to be doing this as a man. What is so incredibly difficult about that scenario, though, is the moment there's so much happening in that scenario that a woman has her experience of getting pushed a little too hard or offended or frustrated and wanting him to do it better. A woman, I constantly have to help women recognize when I'm with a couple, especially, okay, when he's doing that and you give the slightest hint that he did any part wrong because you're feeling a little bit frustrated about it, the problem is, you know, he's learning how to do this stuff, and the ease with which he can be shattered is the reality of how confident he really is and how much he's learned how to be that way. You follow?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So this is what you're teaching. You're teaching people how to get stronger in being with all that. Yeah.
I think something that's just a byproduct of the work that I do is, because I always sense when it happens, and often it happens on the phone during the phone consult, or it happens in the first session. For a man to have these self-doubts or insecurities, or just this sort of hole in his body of knowledge or skills, you know, and you know, first of all, we convince men that you have to have it. You always have to know what you're doing, and then if you don't, well, you better know how to fake it. And you know, you can't ask, you can't complain, you can't look insecure. So you either have to know it all or fake it really well. And so
and you better figure out how to be vulnerable.
And that too.
At some really good times, and show how much you don't get it and don't know how to do it, and how you're vulnerable, just like us women.
Yeah.
That's exhausting.
Yeah. Show your vulnerability, but don't look weak even for a millisecond in that moment, because then I'll freak out. You know what I mean? It's so what we put on them is so hard. And so because I have done, I have worked one-on-one with men in some way, shape, or form in a sexual arena for well over 20 years. And because the way I'm wired, I approach life, and in a lot of ways like a man. So I get that thing about ambition, about doing things right, about accomplishing things, you know, not complaining, about, you know, whereas, you know, for a lot of men, it's like, I am what I do, you know, like they're not, so I get them, and I get that insecurity about them. And so but I'm also a woman. And so I have the same sort of, those receptive, nurturing qualities.
Yeah.
And so as their sort of placeholder, you know, when we're working together, I'm in the role of their partner. To some degree, I have a lot of roles, but that's one of them. As soon as I say something along the lines of, you know, yes, you're not crazy, you're being asked to know things you have no way of knowing. You know, like also, here's a good example. If we're talking about something very technical, like cunnilingus, okay, it's true that there are not all women like it different, but most, you know, there are a lot of nuances there, you know, and so you may have had 3 partners and you may have figured out exactly how those 3 women want it, but your next partner might want it completely different.
Oh, they will.
Yeah. And so, and she might not, in fact, odds are she's not going to say, that's great. Could you do it a little faster, a little harder, a little higher? Right. Could you use your fingers? Could you, you know, could you shift back and forth? Could you go clockwise, not counterclockwise, whatever? Some women are great at that, but the majority of them aren't. They're somewhere between silent about it and sporadic about how they impart that information. And so that is a challenge for men, right? I mean, that's pretty clear. So when I tell them you're not crazy, women are, you know, we do all like it a little bit different. We don't generally like to tell you. It is really difficult. It's not quite fair. You're not crazy. You know, when I validate what they go through, I can hear it and feel it vibrationally. I can feel them just sort of exhale, like, oh my God, okay. Yeah. She understands what I'm going through and it's okay. Like, because I think their guy friends get it, but I think that they would really like to be able, and they don't have to tell me. I already know when they come in, you know, just in talking to them, I ask the right questions and I know what it is they're struggling with. And when I tell them they're not crazy and that I can help them learn what they need to learn, there's just this very palpable sense of relief. Yeah. Yeah. And that's not on my list of offerings, but it just sort of comes with the territory. And, well, it brings me a lot of joy, but every time it happens, I'm reminded how much men carry, you know, on a daily basis. They get out of bed every day and step into the role of provider, producer, man in charge, you know, responsible for the success or failure of everything that they're a part of. And it's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot. You know, an interesting thing, when you were talking about, you know, the woman saying, you know, what she likes and, you know, go counterclockwise, go clockwise. So it's actually fascinating for me when I know as a man that I like that. It's so helpful. But then I've been with women who are so good at it, and then they actually take over with it and cross this line of saying so intensely exactly everything to be doing. Now that there's so much going on subconsciously there that I actually feel kind of a little ridiculous explaining what I think's going on, but I think it takes me out of masculine energy entirely, because there's two masculine beings in the room at that point. So that's a really tricky thing for the woman to figure out, how to say it, but not how to continuously say each and everything, because that takes a man off his masculine game, which makes him feel hurt and wounded and like a little boy, which actually translates to him then being feminine, and then they don't know what the hell just happened.
Yeah, and that's a great way to lose an erection. If somebody is prone to erectile dysfunction, that right there will do it. And you can't have two masculine energies in the room. The polarity is off. They're going to repel each other. It's simply not going to work. Yeah. And you know, you can shift roles, back and forth in one encounter, but one person has to be the assertive and the other has to be receptive. And there's a line. I mean, it's confusing all around. I mean, it's difficult for women, I say, not a lot of women are good saying what they, well, there's a reason for that. You know, I don't want to make it sound like, you know, men have all the burden. Women are raised a certain way. So, you know, we don't teach men to ask for help, and we don't teach women to state their needs. And that's a recipe for disaster.
It is.
Yeah, it is. And communication is key, you know, but sometimes communication is not super sexy, you know, I mean, it doesn't feel super sexy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big topic too. Yeah. Do you literally teach a man attunement and teach him how to go in for a kiss with you?
Yeah,
I will actually teach him and tell him everything happening in the moment between you and him.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty unsexy, really, when you think about it, because I think it probably could be like, I've never been on a film set, but I would imagine it's a little bit like the director and a cameraman right up in your face as you're going in for the big passionate kiss, you know, and while the music is playing, he's screaming, tilt your head a little bit to the left, and, you know, less pouty, and gaze into her eye. You know, it's a lot like that. And, you know, I do work with occasionally men who are virgins and men who have never kissed before.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so when you get to, say, age 30 or older, and you've never kissed a woman, not only do you have that issue of inexperience, you know, you're kind of starting from scratch. And so moving in, which way do you tilt your head? How far do you tilt back? Because, you know, say a man has never kissed before, and he gets the tilt right, and your lips touch, but he's a little too forceful, you know, your neck is, little things like having your neck pushed too far back, or if he's not forceful enough and the woman's having to lean forward, you know, it throws off the, so I teach them all of that. I also teach, you know, body language when you're going in for that kiss, unless you've asked for it and she said yes. There's a really, you want to take a slow approach, and there's like a 2 or 3 step process to sort of gauge her interest, to signal her you're going to do it. If you're not going to ask, you need to make your signals that you're going to try very, very clear. And so that's a whole, you know, just signaling that you're going in for a kiss is one, you know, one exercise. So, and there's a lot of, there are a lot of little nuances, and where to put your hand, and then, you know, if once they've got that part down, one of the next moves that I like to teach is, okay, so say the kiss is going really well, and you're on the couch, and you're, you know, after a while you're starting to get a crick in your neck because of the positioning. One really nice move, she may not be ready for this, but one nice move from there can be to pull her onto your lap, you know, and that's kind of if you have a guy who's a 30-year-old virgin, he's not only does he not have the technical skills, but he's got a confidence issue that's blocking him emotionally. Usually there are very few men who come in and say, hey, I'm a 30-year-old virgin, I never kissed a woman, I want you to teach me. And it's only the movements they want. I can give them a book on that, or, you know, write it up. But I have to get them to, okay, so if you want to pull her onto your lap, this is where you place your hands, and this is how you grab her, and kind of, you know, the pressure you put on her hips. And a lot of times I've had to say this phrase a lot, like, you know, really grab her hips. You know, there's a difference between placing your hand on a woman's hips and grabbing her hip like it's a handle and yanking her onto your lap, you know. So there's a lot of little nuances.
It's confidence. It's I'm doing this is happening next.
It's like you said, a woman, that's a turn on. A woman likes to know a man is, you know, he's going for what he wants. He's hopefully doing it in a respectful way with consent, but he is going for what he wants. And that conveys in a grip, you know, where, you know, and a lot of little ways.
Yeah. Now I'm a fan of words, and I'm a much bigger fan of an absolute confident set of words rather than asking permission. And the part about asking permission is, I mean, that's a big debate, but you know, if you're somewhat obviously connecting and there's some kind of romantic energy going on, you know, asking permission is the exact thing that will kill the romance. So, so instead, it's a really good interim step that I did a lot in my life, and actually I've taught it to a lot of people, and they've used it really successfully, and that means that instead of just going in and trying to detect all the cues, you actually use words, I'm going to kiss you in a moment, and you're going to be shocked how good I am at this.
I like that.
Right.
See, that would turn me on. That
Yeah.
would work. That would work on me. Yeah. Yeah.
Now the guy has to pay strong attention to her response. Because she's got confusion going on over there too, how to be feminine, but how to set boundaries, how to not get taken advantage of. It's a whole set of, if I had one wish, it would be to have a woman's brain for one day. And then I would just know exactly how to describe what a woman's thinking. But yeah.
It's a supercomputer, because she is computing, in that moment. She's, maybe it's a first date, maybe it's a third date. If it's a first or second date, she might be thinking, well, hold on now. I was thinking I did want that, but I was thinking date 3 or 4.
Yeah.
How do I feel about that now? Do I trust him enough? Do I want him enough?
Yeah.
What will it say? What kind of permission will it give him to do next? Because that's a big thing for women. Like, not so much the boundary that's being pushed or crossed or the step that's being taken, but where's that going to lead? We're always thinking, 2 steps ahead. If I let him do this, which I really want to do, will he think the next thing is okay? And do I know how to stop him? If I don't, then I probably can't go for step 1, because I won't know how to stop step 2. And it's all valid too. I mean, this isn't like crazy talk. This is really valid
stuff. I know.
Yeah. So what women go through is really challenging too.
Yeah. I have to go to the most primal, direct thing that men are thinking. Mm-hmm. If we just start from the center of it, during all that you're going through, we're thinking, how far can I get?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're good. We're good people. We want to have real monogamous relationships, a real intimacy, real connection. But in that moment of trying to increase what's happening sexually, there is not much else going on other than I need to win. Mm-hmm. I need to achieve this to the best of my ability. It only takes life experience as a man to know how to slow that down, because of knowing if I really want to be with this woman in a bigger way. I gotta tell you, I'm pretty good at this, and I am still growing at doing this. So the immediacy of sexuality seems like the thing our body is telling us we should do, regardless of the consequences. Mm-hmm. And that is a part that I'm describing right now. It makes it very hard on both sexes that a man's biology is doing what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, therein lies the growth. I mean, I think that, the feminine and masculine energies balance each other, whether we both, everyone has both. So if you have a man who's in that assertive role, mm-hmm. and pushing that envelope, and God love men for doing that. We wouldn't have jet airplanes. We wouldn't have, reached the top of what is that darn mountain? I'm going like Everest.
Yeah, Everest.
Yeah, but it is unfortunate that it just sort of has automatically fallen to women to be the gatekeepers of the mm-hmm. of that part of the relationship. And it shouldn't be that way. And it's really just, for men to keep that assertive part of themselves, while also learning attunement and empathy and just awareness of boundaries and awareness of, empathy, awareness of what a woman's going through. Mm-hmm. But, the second half of that, and it's a 50-50 thing in my mind, is that, all women are going to be more comfortable if women need to feel safe. And that doesn't necessarily mean, like their partner is completely innocuous, or women like a strong man who has potential to be a brute, but to know that she is empowered to set those boundaries and have them maintained, to maintain them by using her words or whatever. Because, you know, bottom line is, if men were, if we raised men to be more empathetic and we raised women to be more vocal, then we would probably be in a better place. And so with a little bit of effort from both sides, and it's, as a woman, I can tell you, I can be very assertive in a lot of different ways. I can express that masculine side of myself, but I get that part about not wanting to hurt a man's feelings and deal with the fallout of that, and create a conflict and be the one who's responsible for dampening the arousal. You know, setting boundaries can be like a cold shower. And at the same time, I decided, you know, this was going to make my sex life better. So I started learning the same types of patterns were appearing in my life with it, like with any woman, you know, saying yes when I really wanted, when it was time to stop, and, you know, doing it because it was easier than saying no, or just all that type of stuff. So after a while, enough of the same patterns were happening that I was like, okay, so next time I'm going to use this phrasing. And I would sit at home on the couch and think, what is the best way, a sexy way to pull the brakes? What kind of phrasing can I use? And I would have it ready in my head for the next time that happened. And for years, that has worked for me. Every now and then a new situation arises and I don't have the right phrasing or the right move to get my needs across. And sometimes something happens that I regret or wish, oh, I wish I'd have redirected that trajectory. But that's life. I learn by making mistakes or by dropping the ball, whatever. You know, and that's how I learn. I'm always grateful for the opportunity. But yeah, there's not a lot of, like, I don't coach women mainly because I feel like women need a very specific type of, they respond to a different approach sometimes. You know, they're more sort of body based, and because I communicate like a man, and I've always worked with men, I have an affinity for it. It's automatic and natural to me. But there's a part of me that wants to coach women someday, because there's not a lot of encouragement. I mean, there's a lot of complaining. We're starting to see the problem and talk about it, but we're not. There are not a lot of very specific techniques and phrasing and coaching, and, you know, for how we can take charge of the situation and get our needs spoken and met. There's a wonderful woman. Do you know Kasia Urbanak or something like that? She was a pro dom. She was a huge pro dom apparently in New York, and now she's got like a coaching for women where she does this exact thing. But I've never seen anyone else like her. I'll send you her link.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you one example of what I do, and it'll be repetitive for the women in my group, but we may show this video outside. We'll see. So I use the word gatekeeper a lot. Like, women are the absolute gatekeepers, and even when they don't believe that, like it's their decision whether, you know, you're going further a lot of the time. And so what happens to a man if he has sex with her on the first date, second date, maybe the third date? I mean, third dates, you know, I'm not a prude, you know. So if they have sex too fast before there's any emotional attunement going on, what happens to a man is quite bizarre. And I'll actually tell you, this has been something. I was in 3 men's groups, each lasting 2 years. And this is something in every men's group that we actually, when we would get clear on this topic, we would actually kind of all have a big sigh of depression of being this way. And what it is that we meet a woman, we're excited, we want to get to know her. And if we have sex too fast, we actually, the way you would hear about this, you know, kind of in the movie, you know, in Hollywood in the movies is, you know, the man lost respect for her because she slept with him too fast. Actually, there's actually something that's even more real about that than you can imagine. When we have sex too fast, our body and our soul has completed that mission. Mm-hmm. And if we don't have an actual several dates more of experience of knowing if this would be a good person, like when I project out of having this person in my life as a partner, if I haven't had enough time getting to know that, my soul literally discards her as an option to keep going forward with. Or I do the worst thing, which is I turn her into friends with benefits, and she thinks a relationship's possibly going to happen, and he absolutely knows the truth. It's not going to happen. Because this thing happened first. What's so amazing to me is if this thing didn't happen first, it could have been a relationship. So I'll tell you what I've done with women, and I'm thinking about 5 to 8% of them have taken me up on this because I know the amount of feedback I get. But as a woman, as the gatekeeper, you need to use words to tease and to tell the man what he's in for, to get him excited and waiting that something's going to happen next, right? Like, so, you know, the end of the third date, your second date, third date, you're having a kiss, you know, whisper in his ear, boy, are you going to love my body? Yeah. You're not going to believe how sexy I am. I can't wait till we get there. You know, I'm going to blow your mind.
Yeah.
So, you know, whatever it is. And that simple thing done well makes a man call you back.
Yeah.
That's it. Because he's projecting out, wow, I'm enjoying my time. I have not been criticized yet. That's the death of a man calling you back. And she's into me, and sex is going to happen, and it's going to be phenomenal. He actually has no capability of thinking, wow, she prevented that thing that happens where if I have sex too fast, I won't call her back. He's not smart. Like, me in that situation, being aware of all that, I would barely remember that that's what's really happening, right? So what I'm describing is very accurate, but it's up to the woman more than she knows to make it go that way.
Yeah.
So that's what women need to be taught, in my perspective, as one of the main things to learn how to do.
Yeah,
So,
I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
I was in my 40s, and, you know, in my opinion, and by any standard, I was an experienced woman. I understood men at the next level, and yet more was being revealed all the time. And it was revelatory to me at 42, I guess, 43, that I could be empowered in that way, that I could direct the pacing of our sexual connection and have that be appreciated. that I could, you know, and that it would be fun, because it's a turn on too, you know, that building that anticipation and expressing myself as a sexual being. You know, the first time you do that, the first time you signal a guy that his desire is not a burden, but something that excites you. I mean, he opens up. Like it's like it's such a beautiful thing to see, because we do sort of, a lot of men go around feeling like their desire is a burden. And that's a horrible thing to feel. It's just horrible. Mm-hmm. And so, and women do, like you say, you have to be gatekeepers. And so that's a lot of times how it comes across. So if you're able to do what you said, and I love those words, I'm going to write those down. And I'm going to, for when I coach women, I'm going to borrow that years from now.
Great.
But yeah, when you do that, not only does it build that, you know, that heat up for the woman too, but it's a beautiful gift. And yeah, it feels so empowering. It's just magical. It's magical to realize that you can state your needs. You can engage in a sexy back and forth. And it's like you've got little knobs and levers, and you're deciding how fast this is going, and it's a ride. It's a beautiful. That was really well said.
Thank you. Kind of a new thought I'm having is how I wouldn't consider myself like a sex coach. The work I do with couples is, it's deeply emotional, but I do talk about sex often as a barometer. And it's a barometer for how much conflict is actually happening. There's a long debate that I've been listening to. Do you know Alison Armstrong? She's a coach. There's a debate she's been having with some other people in this field, and it's a very complex debate. The libido of man and the focus on sexuality is, I know we have, sexual dysfunction and all that, but it also is, for millions of men, a very big focus. And then we have women who are more, they're more complex in emotions, having so many more pathways, and whether or not they're feeling connected and safe. So what I struggle with a lot with women in here when they're with, their boyfriends, their husbands, is understanding how a woman could have 15, 20, 25 things that are the things that make her feel connected. And a man feels connected if he's gotten to have sex. This is a huge generalization, but this is where I get into something that I go so slow with this information, because it's really tough for the woman to deal with sometimes, which is, so sometimes you want to move in and have sex as a way of doing the thing that will make him feel good towards you. And that is very tricky, because, our whole society, especially now, is in support of, setting boundaries. And if you don't feel like it's the right time, and, you set the boundary. What women don't understand is that a man barely has the words to explain his level of frustration in his life when he's not able to have sex with the person he goes to bed with and is lying there right next to him every night. The amount of confusion inside him, sexually, physically, emotionally, is enormous. And I say this, on a video like this, so women will know that's happening in just all the same ways for her. She's got 15 things she could write down on a list easily about what she's annoyed with her guy. He's often got two. One is, I'm not having sex. The other one is, I'm not able to make her smile any longer. I'm not able to make her happy because she's annoyed with me, and most of what I do is now wrong, and I get criticized for it. And it's unbelievable. Big generalizations here, but it's unbelievable how fast a man's resentments will go away when he gets one moment of praise in here about something he's done right.
Yeah.
And a woman has got 15, 20 layers of resentment. It's actually not a big general. It's a generalization, but it's not a big generalization. It happens a lot.
Yeah.
So the woman has to undo and uncover all these different pathways to things that have hurt her feelings, and the man does not remember most of those. He just would like if she would reach out and touch his hand. So is this in alignment with what you're teaching?
I completely agree.
Okay.
And, I will state up front, this is somewhat of a generalization, but it's also, sort of a truism. Women don't understand, as a rule, that longing, that the intensity of that longing and what it means and what it encompasses for a man. And they sort of assume, it's a natural human thing to assume, that everyone else is experiencing life the way you're experiencing life.
Yeah.
the reason I say with such confidence that women don't really get that is because in my life, you know, like I said, I sort of had a strong, you know, masculine sort of energy through a lot of my life. I also had an extended period where my sex drive was no doubt very much more in line with a man's. It was bordering on pathological, like hypersexual. I mean, a constant state of arousal. And I also, because I had intimacy issues when I got sober, I'm a recovered alcoholic and an addict. And so when I got sober, I spent a good 8-10 years learning to overcome my intimacy issues. That's how I ended up becoming an intimacy coach, because it gave me my life back. And I kind of consider this my calling. But for me, emotional intimacy and sexual partnering was one and the same. It was how I felt connected. It was for a time the only way I felt connected. It was the only way I felt alive and valued and grounded. You know, I felt both very human and grounded and part of, as well as the presence of God. I mean, it was just everything to me. And when I hear men talk about the way they feel about sex, I mean, that's how it was for me. I mean, I do agree that that's, you know, I needed to expand the ways I connect to people. It wasn't healthy for me to just live that way. But because I've had that experience, and then as a woman, you know, my hormones changed when I was 40-ish, so 10 years ago. And there was a little bit of turmoil and bouncing around, but within a couple of years, I settled into what, by all accounts, everything I've read and heard from most women is exactly what the average woman experiences as her general sex drive. You know, as opposed to having that the arousal first and then the desire. It's responsive versus spontaneous. So that'd be that's the easiest way to explain it. You know, and I used to have very spontaneous. If the wind blew, you know, if I wasn't focused on work or writing, you know, I was basically consumed with thoughts of sex. Now, if something triggers me, like being on a date with my partner or seeing something, you know, sexy movie or something, you know, the triggers, it's responsive. So I know what it's like to have an average woman's sex drive, and I know what it's like to have a typical young man's sex drive, and they're totally different animals. They just are. The difference is mind-boggling, and what's been fantastic is with you know, transgenders being a lot of them have been interviewed, and they will tell you the difference because they have had the experience of having the, you know, the high testosterone and the male sex drive, whereas they were once a woman and vice versa. And they say the exact same thing. I had no idea what it was like to be a man or to be a woman. Yeah, it's a thing. It's a huge thing. And it's very hard. It's like trying to describe a color to a blind person. Yeah. I think.
There's no way to get it. I still kind of trip out on it. I wake up in the morning, and if I could have a good partner, I could have really good sex, I could have no sex, or sex all night long, and then I wake up the next morning, in Groundhog Day, right? I wake up and I literally sometimes I take a moment sometimes and just go, oh, it's back. Oh. Every single day, it's this little ticking time bomb. Yeah. And how am I going to use this today? It's not accompanied by anything like the bonding hormones that a woman has. So, you know, it's not a justification, but it's an explanation for, you know, men being the ones, you know, doing all this sexual, you know, deviant behavior. And, you know, a man not knowing where to put it and what to do with it. So I want a woman to study everything she can. I've made a lot of videos on it. I'm trying to get this information out there. I want a woman to study everything she can about how different a man is in this arena. And then at the end of it go, and there's still no possible way I could understand it. But I'm going to empathize with this thing that I don't get. You know,
Yeah.
because a woman is more complex in almost every way I can think of. But and a woman's sexuality, I won't call it complex. It's a mystery. It's a puzzle. It's fascinating. But I can imagine what it's like to have a woman's sexuality. I can imagine it. I think I probably can imagine it fairly well.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot imagine this burden of the male sex drive that's in us. It's not imaginable. It's I often think, you know, I'll you know, I'll go to the gym, and I'm personally fascinated with the psychological emotional mind, obviously. And I watch women that dress up so sexy in my gym, and I watch the men go through every possible iteration of whether he can look at her or not. So there's the men that gawk, there's the men that absolutely, they walk right by her, and I know they see her in their peripheral vision, and they do not shift their head 1 degree because that's been taken away. That's off limits. There are men that circle the gym and go way out of their way just so they can walk and do, you know, 1 loop behind her. This is going on at all times. And I'll give you one thing I teach young men. I once in a while have young men come in here, and they're in shock how burdened they are by this. Like, these are men going to college and trying to get an Ivy League education, and they cannot concentrate. And I change their lives with this one concept. I say, you are not allowed to stare at a woman for more than 5 seconds. And if you want to go past 5 seconds, you have to talk to her.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's
you have
great.
to make contact. And preferably you do what I do, which is make them laugh. Some men can't do this, but I've actually shown men, like I've taken them and we go from place to place, store to store, wherever. You can make a woman laugh by saying the most in the moment ridiculous thing right now about what's happening. You know?
Yeah, that's always what gets me. Like, I remember recently, like at Whole Foods, you know, I go to Whole Foods every week, and every now and then you'll get hit on, and it sounds like something he's probably used. Maybe it's even funny, but it sounds like something that just sort of came out of nowhere, or it's a line that he used or worked on. Somebody came up to me. I was looking at this big wall of 100 different kinds of waters, and I forget what it was, but he made a joke about all these different types of waters. Yeah. And he was so casual about it, and just, it was sudden and funny that I ended up hitting on him. Yeah. He got me to hit on him. I mean, he was that good. But yeah, that thing about in the moment. I think a woman appreciates that, because maybe subconsciously it shows her that you're in the moment. You know, you're not on the prowl or trying to capture her. You're just being with her in the moment. I do want to circle back to that thing you said. There's something also I think is worth repeating, and that is that, you know, women might have 15 complaints that they're on a daily basis, and they might be all sort of justified. You know, he's 50 years old and he doesn't do the line. He doesn't know how to fold line, whatever. Yeah. But what I do see, and I've seen this for years and years, is that, you know, women have their stuff too. And I think men just consider it part of the package. You know, they just sort of forgive a lot of the little things. Mm-hmm. And yeah, if they felt appreciated for what they do and who they are, and they experienced that appreciation in the desire of their partner, feeling desired and having that interaction. I mean, you could go shopping every day of the, year if you just did those two things. I don't want to be reductive, but men are beautifully simple creatures.
We are so simple. Jerry Seinfeld does a thing where he says, he talks about a woman and then he says, you know what men are thinking? Nothing.
That sounds just like him.
Kind of nothing.
Yeah. God love him.
One of my favorite psychological studies I ever read was they put, this was a big one, a couple thousand people, and they put men in a room for a really long time. I think with magazines maybe, and then they put women in a room, you know, with magazines and not much to do, and they just observed them. And they sat in these rooms for, I think 90 minutes was the time frame. And the study wasn't happening in the room. The study was happening after, where they gave them a questionnaire. And they asked the men what they were thinking about mostly. And they wrote all the things down. And the top two was sex and sports. Okay. So I never would have guessed that there was a number one that was up there for women, and like number two wasn't even a close second. And I could have never, and I'm pretty good at this, and I could have never guessed what women were thinking about.
I'm dying to know.
They reviewed conversations.
Like past conversations that they'd have? Yeah. That makes, I get that.
I love that.
Yeah.
Because they're working out something that is so amazing to me, which is, how do I know I'm close to someone? Or how do I know that someone is not safe to be with? Or who's my closest? You know, they're rating the connections they have.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating how much I love that stuff, and I write about that stuff. Like, how do you know when you're close? How do you determine that? But as just me, as just a man, I don't really do that all the time. So I guess it's just occurring to me right now. I'm writing that for women, I think, mostly. My mind is not trying to evaluate what the whole relationship has been, like I think a woman does.
Right. And I think women are under the impression that a man is doing that. Like they're under the impression. I know that there have been times I've done it. You know, I had to sort of learn myself out of it, but it's very common for, you know, say a woman, you have a conversation with your partner, maybe it's an argument, and then it's over, and you spend the next 3 days going, well, what did he really mean when he said this or that? Especially if you've just started dating. You know, was he saying that he was like, you know, losing interest, or was he, you know, was he saying I'm fat? I don't, whatever. Was he saying that, you know, he wants, I'm not interesting enough, you know? And because women communicate in roundabout ways, you know, indirect ways, they sort of assume, I think, that men are doing that too. And, you know, it's just, it's not the case. And so you can have a 6-hour conversation in your head about what this conversation or this argument meant. And really it just meant exactly what he was saying. Usually men are not, a lot of them just don't have the time or energy to be all that cunning. And I'm not saying that this is definitely a generalization, because there are men who are a little subversive and not upfront about their feelings. But I think if you found yourself a good one, odds are that he is.
I'll bring this up as maybe a last question for us. Talking about the sexual realm. So couples will begin talking about sex. This probably has to do with how much I focus on their emotional connection first. But after maybe 6 sessions, I will begin down the road of talking about sex. I don't bring it up. That just seems to be when they do, around session 5 or 6. I'm not a forever couples counselor person who spends 3 years. 12 sessions is like the average. So we get to session 6 or so, and what gets recognized very clearly a lot of the time is, even if their sex life is working somewhat, what we have here, because of this masculine feminine disconnect, I'm not going to be airy fairy with those words. I'm going to try to be specific. We have a man that might even get to have sex enough of the time with his partner, but he doesn't actually have the skills to get enough sustenance from it. It's almost all of them. It's almost every couple. And I'll start with the simplest idea, and you might want to expand on this, but a man loves sex. He loves a woman's body. He hopefully loves the woman's body he's got right in front of him, and he doesn't tell her that. He doesn't look at her body. He doesn't express all of his affection and everything he wants to do to her body because of this block of not being in a strong, confident state, and her not understanding how to work with her feelings of being objectified that are negative. It's so, I can't imagine what a woman has to go through with men looking at them, 100,000 eyes on them their whole lives, and then all of a sudden they're in a real relationship. And this man wants to do that. And that's the one to like open the door and let him do that. But she's felt objectified her whole life, and that people have wanted to know her for her body, which is true because it's what men do first. And this is a conversation I actually do step couples through. Like he's literally making love to her and with her in a lot of ways, fantasizing about another woman's body. Mm-hmm. Now that'll happen. That's okay. But not fantasizing enough about the one right in front of him, mm-hmm. and making it known to her. That's total vulnerability in the sexuality department. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if is that an idea that you've thought through in the way I have, that you apply to men and tell them to then begin doing specifics like that, specific things?
Well,
get the sustenance he needs, because it changes his whole needing other women and his whole reaching outside of the relationship. I'm convinced changes if that works much better.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding you right.
Yeah.
So what he's doing, the way he's limiting himself is by, in his head, he's thinking about someone else.
He's hiding. He's hiding the lust. I want him to be honest about the lust.
Yeah. I'm going to say, I'm going to think about this some and get back to you, but I will say right now, I started stripping when I was 18, and I fell in love at 20. I'd fallen in love a few times before that, and I made a very clear distinction all through my life. In high school, when I started dating and having sex, if I was drawn to someone on a purely animal, lustful level, or if we had lust and friendship, or if there was a romantic potential. I mean, I was clear about how I felt about everyone I was wanting to see or seeing. And there were times where I was objectifying the man I was with, just as much or more. I mean, honestly, I've been in more times than I can count on one hand that I can clearly remember realizing later that guy was really into me, and I used him and I hurt him. Uh-huh. Yeah. I mean, I've done that enough. I've done that whole, like Aziz Ansari type of thing. I mean, when I was caught up in that insane sex drive, you're just not thinking clearly, and you think you're on the same page. And if you just, try a different tactic, you'll get your partner on the same page, whatever. Yeah. And then you look back, but once I became a stripper at 18, I mean, that's black and white objectification, and yet it's consensual objectification. And also it's compensated. I mean, I was paid very well to be an object of, sexuality and femininity. And I also got a chance to just sit down and talk with the customers and get to know them and get to know men and have fun conversations. And I mean, it was a party every night. I had a great time. But I've never had a problem. I don't like non-consensual objectification. And I think that is a lot, I chose to be a stripper. Most women are not choosing to be put on a stage and stared at for their body. Yeah. So when I'm with a partner and he is when he comes home from work and he drops his briefcase and pins me against the wall and doesn't say a word and just, takes me like a caveman, I mean, I have no problem with that. Yeah, sure. I really don't. But, I think that, I think that if a woman opens up to that, if a woman sometimes it's just a matter of sitting down and saying, do I like this animal, this primal side, this caveman in my partner? What would our relationship be like without that? And then maybe it would occur to her, this is a good thing. And to respond to that in kind, express that inner cave woman.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe their sex life will sort of start to open up naturally. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. This is another reason I don't coach women, because my experience and my sort of preferences and opinions are sometimes very much more in line with a man's. And so sure. I might not give, I might not be all that empathetic. I think objectification can be really sexy as long as it's consensual, I don't know.
Me too. And I just want to teach women, this is equivalent. I want to, I want men and women to both know what that scenario is. And as you were talking about, the stripping, I think in terms of, a man, goes to a strip club, I go to a strip club, let's say, and I have that lust thing happening. Men don't go to strip clubs with their buddies and high five each other. I mean, in the 1% of cases, it's a bachelor party, but 99.999% of the time, they're there alone, looking, and that's an element of excitement and lust that that's been the biggest challenge of bringing that into couples relationships. And I'll sit there explaining this, and the man's just shaking his head like, wow, I'd love to be able to do this. And the woman is dumbfounded, like really, like you want to you want to look at my body, and you want to, and she's got a lot of struggle with that, about not feeling like he's looking into, her heart and wanting to know her deeply, and that it's shallow. But I'll say something about that. It seems like the male sex drive is this first layer of connection that you could think of as shallow in some ways, without it being judgment. I just do want to use the word shallow for a moment. But what happens for him, because of having to being allowed to have lust and have sex, everything after for him becomes the same kind of connective emotions that I believe she has.
Yes.
He just has it in a little bit of a different order.
Yes. Oh, you said that so beautifully. That's exactly it. Yeah. I think, I had so many thoughts when you were talking. That was really, truly beautiful. And now that I'm not able to articulate what I was thinking, but I think women do have having to be gatekeepers means, we have to make sure that men are not slipping in their morality or whatever. And there's this sense that being the object of sexual desire is inherently a disrespectful or disrespected position. Right. And it's not. In fact, the opposite. You will own that man if you engage with him that way. He will worship you. He will put you on a pedestal, and he will truly consider you his goddess.
Yeah, I know how few women understand this. I go out into the world, and I've worked for years on my stare at a woman. And what I mean by that is, I have attraction, I look. It is so few women that know how to give a stare back. This is separate from whether they like me or they're interested. So few women know how to give a stare back that shows, I get you. It's pretty sexy being over here, being this woman and being feminine like I am. And I get that I've ignited your masculine, and that's awesome. Like, isn't that fun? Yeah. Thanks for noticing me. And that was a good time. And you deserve to know that I let that in, and it made me feel good. And you get to have that thing where you make a woman feel good by looking at her based on her physical appearance.
Yeah. It's inspiring. And, you know, in that moment, she's a music, you know, men are so sexually driven that, but that inspiration, that ignited spark, you know, even if it's all in his genitals, that fuels him through the day. You know, passion is passion, whether that's passion for a woman or passion for your work. You know, if you took all the women and put them on one planet and all the men and put them on the other, there'd be nothing to inspire them. They would, a year later, you would have all the women, you know, they would have figured out whatever, you know, adult toys they need. And there would, you know, they'd have their little tribes and everything would be very organized and calm. And there would be a certain segment of the women who were the lesbians taking care. And then there would be toys and what. The men would have spent the entire year building a spaceship to get to that other planet, because life means nothing otherwise. There's no,
pretty much.
And God loved them for it.
Yeah, we're busted.
I mean, I think I consider it an honor to, you know, there was a time, and this has to be done right. You don't want some guy on Match.com sending you a couple emails and then suddenly saying, yeah, I whacked off to the image of you yesterday. It's like, dude, we haven't even met yet. I mean, that kind of stuff happens all the time. That's completely disrespectful. But at the same time, when I've dated someone and maybe I did a lot of, for some reason, I've ended up with a lot of men who've lived out of state or whatever, or just when I had a stripper blog and I would get an email sometimes from one of my regular commenters, and they said, boy, that, you know, that I would tell stories about what it's like to be aging, to have hurt my back, to be going through a breakup, to watch my cat die. I mean, I told stories in that blog about all kinds of things, but every now and then I would tell stories about a wonderful sexual encounter I had with my new boyfriend, or what the audition was like at that new club. And, you know, and I would get an email like, oh, you know, that was really a turn on. And I, you know, had a fantasy about you yesterday. I'm honored. I'm glad I could inspire you. I'm glad that I sparked some, you know, passion in you and was the inspiration for that moment for you, that, you know, that fueled your day or what. I mean, I just think I'm not offended at all. I think that I don't find men's desire to be a burden. And I think I think that if a lot of women went home tonight and somehow found a way to impart that little nugget of information, I don't find your desire to be a burden. I love your desire. I appreciate your desire, even if they, you know, change their mind the next day. But I mean, most women would be shocked at how touched their partners would be by that, how thrilled they would be.
And I'm stunned by a woman. I mean, I have so much empathy for a woman who can find her way through that, with all of the, you know, dick pics and all of the nonsense that gets sent her way, to actually sort through that. I'm going to actually compare this to like the complexity of the male sex drive for a minute. That's kind of maybe one thing that's a woman's equivalent, like to have to sort through to detect a good guy that isn't that way, and immediately do that and give him positive feedback about his tiny moment of lust coming towards her.
Yeah, I should say, I mean, as a stripper, as somebody who, I did that for 14 years. I worked in the arena of sexuality for a total of 22 plus years. So I have had lots of practice. Like when you work in a strip club, you know, on average, maybe you meet 25 guys a day. So maybe you meet 5 one day and 50 the next, but on average you can meet in 8 hours. And so after 14 years, I have a supercomputer too. And what I do is I look at a man, and in 3 seconds to 3 minutes to 30 minutes, I have discovered more about him than, you know, I'm just absorbing information. I know what questions to ask. I know I'm reading everything because it's a skill that I've developed. Most women don't have the opportunity to do that. So, and they're still supercomputers, you know, I'm kind of next level about you know, I have a lot of wisdom about this one area. But I was out in the field learning it. So I got my PhD in that. It's sort of reading a man, reading who's safe, you know, seeing the signs, seeing the red flags. Most women, you know, didn't have that opportunity. So it is much harder for them. And, you know, I also should say, I'm one of the, what are the statistics? 1 in 5 women has been sexually molested or raped, and I was never raped. I was never molested. I think that has affected how open I am in this vein, and so I just want to acknowledge that, because a lot of women aren't that lucky.
I would say about 1/3 of the women get really, really frustrated by my videos on the male sex drive when I'm explaining it. And I'm right off the bat, when a woman's had abuse issues with this stuff, just hearing it, the perspective on this nature of a man and his sex drive. I've cleared parties with this topic. I've been in a living room where this topic started, and I went into it. And I will just briefly give you the scenario. We have, 30 people in the room, and 15 men and 15 women. And the men are kind of nodding their heads like, wow, he's really explaining it. And they're not saying a word. And the women are getting annoyed and confused, and not confused, but annoyed. And then they leave. And then the men come up and ask for my phone number, like to do work on this, but they will not touch the topic. It's a very heated topic, and I appreciate that. I don't say it with judgment. I appreciate what a woman has to go through to learn about this totally different entity. Men are not from Mars, women are not from Venus. Like, men are from one constellation and women are from another constellation. Yeah. They're not comparable, the sex drives of both people. So that's my opinion.
I mean, it's true. And I think that it might be hard to hear or wrap your brain around, or it might be very triggering, but thinking it through, I think if a woman thinks it through, it will actually end up being sort of validating and helpful information to keep in mind. Yeah.
And if she learns what to do with it and how to wrap her mind around kind of checking in, like all the things she wishes he would check in with her on, checking in with him on where he's at with his sexuality, with their connection. Just making that slight switch, like you said, she'll own him. She'll own him with being able to do that. So good stuff. Where do people find you? Mostly men, right? All men. Where do men find you to look at your stuff?
Okay, so I have a few websites because I'm a writer, so I have a website for my writing, and then I have 2 websites for my work. And the main one is my coaching site, and that is, you can find it at KristinCaseyConsulting.com, and that's Kristin with an I-N, Kristin, Casey is C-A-S-E-Y, Consulting. And then there's a link on that site to my secondary site where I work as a surrogate partner, which is similar to the intimacy coaching, but there are some other variables. I work with the client and his therapist. That's really a vital part of that. But there's a link on the site. There's a link on both sites that will lead you back to the other, but it's Surrogate Partner Central Texas, if a person cares to go straight there. And my author site is Kristin Casey Author. All
right. I think you may need to come back. I think we should.
I would love to.
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of interviews for the book lately, and I'm a little nervous on camera or whatever. I just don't like being, I'm not used to it. But I have to say, this was so enjoyable. I would love to come back and do this anytime. You make it very easy for me. Thanks.
Oh, thank you.
And I love the topic too. I could talk about it forever.
It's a great topic. All right. I'll call you in the future. We'll do another. And
all right.
Thanks for coming on, Kristin. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you so much.
We'll talk more.
Bye.
Bye-bye.